Welcome to the Lead Well podcast. Around here, we believe leadership shouldn't cost you your peace, your well-being, or the parts of yourself you've worked so hard to reclaim. I'm your host, Trasetta Washington, leadership wellness coach and strategist, and my mission is to give you practical, actionable steps to reduce overwhelm, lead more effectively, and build a sustainable rhythm for both your team and your life. Let's dive into today's conversation. Hey leaders, welcome back to the Lead Well podcast. Today's episode is for you if leadership has felt chaotic for you lately. Now, I don't mean dramatic chaos. When I say chaos, I'm talking about that less obvious kind, the kind where everything feels urgent. Every decision feels a lot weightier than it should, and you're just kind of constantly firefighting instead of actually being able to lead your team. And I want to say something that may feel relieving, but confronting all at the same time. And that is, chaos doesn't necessarily mean that you are failing as a leader. More often than not, it means that you're operating without alignment. And that distinction really matters because chaos is something that you can work through, and misalignment is something that you can actually correct. Most leaders try to solve chaos from an external perspective. So they look for new systems to put in place. They restructure. Maybe they push harder. They might even add meetings, tools, and frameworks to try to alleviate the chaos. But the shift that really changes everything in leadership does not start from outside of you. It actually starts internally, and that is through alignment. Now, leadership that is chaotic doesn't necessarily look disorganized. In fact, it often looks really like you're competent, at least on the outside. And things are moving forward, your meetings are happening, decisions are being made. But from an internal perspective, you just feel really scattered. You're wearing too many hats. Role creep has become the new normal, and you're carrying a lot of responsibilities that were never meant to sit with you from a long-term perspective. Yes, we have to carry things in the interim or short term, but they're not necessarily supposed to stay with us for the long haul. And what ends up happening is your mind is just constantly switching lanes. Your nervous system is always activated, and the clarity that you really need feels just out of reach. Now, this kind of chaos comes from fragmentation. This is not a lack of skill, right? You're fragmented because you're being pulled in too many different directions internally, even when everything looks hunky-dory on the outside or everything looks good on paper. Now, aligned leadership doesn't mean that life gets easy for you. When I say aligned leadership, that means that your leadership becomes clear, right? Leaders who are aligned know what it is that matters the most in this season, right? They're clear on ownership. They know what belongs to them and what doesn't. They move with intention rather than just simply being driven by urgency. There's this internal steadiness, even when things are busy, even when decisions are complex, even when pressure exists. That alignment is consistency, and it creates consistency between what it is that you value and what you have capacity for, and actually, how you show up, right? This is not about perfection. This is about congruence, that alignment. Now, here's something that leaders don't hear often enough, and that is inner clarity is a performance multiplier. What do I mean by that? When you are clear internally as a leader, the decisions that you make aren't drawn out. You're able to make those quickly. The second guessing goes away because you are clear, and your focus is much more sharp or concentrated because that clarity is there. You don't have to work harder in order for you to be effective. You just have to be clearer. And clear leaders create clear teams. So when you know what matters, your team feels that. When you are internally aligned, your leadership feels different. It hits differently for your team. A lot of leaders think that they have communication problems, and that is the root cause of the challenges that they may be experiencing within their team or within their leadership. But more often than not, it's really an alignment issue. When you as a leader are internally conflicted, then that communication gets a little muddy. It gets ambiguous, right? Because you're passing along information and you're probably hurried or rushed. And so the message is not as clear. Your tone doesn't always match what your intention is. And as a result, your team members kind of get these mixed signals from you. Whereas aligned leaders communicate from a place of groundedness, right? So they don't have to say as much. They can say less, but it lands so much more clearly because they are clear. And they're also able to listen, actively listen, intentionally listen without trying to prepare some sort of rebuttal to whatever it is that someone is saying to them. And so as a result, they respond instead of reacting to whatever is taking place at the time. And your team feels that difference. Clarity isn't about, I should say, it's not just about what you say. It's really more so about how settled you are, how clear you are when you say it. When you come into alignment, when you have that inner alignment, it really changes your leadership presence. Now, your leadership presence isn't about your charisma or your confidence level. Again, it's about that groundedness, that steadiness. And so leaders who are operating from a place of alignment bring calm into rooms that feel tense. They're able to slow things down without losing authority, and they create space just by how they show up in the rooms that they show up in. So your team, they don't just hear leadership, they feel it. You're not just simply managing an environment. What you are doing is setting the environment. You're setting the atmosphere. Leading from a place of alignment also changes the way that you make decisions. When you are out of alignment, the decisions that you make feel exhausting, right? Because you're having to overthink, you're over explaining, and maybe you're even having to revisit things constantly or endlessly. And on the contrary, or in contrast, leaders who are leading from a place of alignment, they decide differently. They make decisions differently because when they're making decisions, they're doing that from a place of their values. They're deciding from a place of knowing what their capacity is, what the team's capacity is. And so as a result, they're able to make those decisions from a long-term perspective, not just, what's a right now, what is great right now, or what's the decision for right now in this moment, what's going to be the best decision long-term. And they also don't feel like they have to justify every decision that they make. They don't spiral after they make decisions. That alignment really ends up quieting all that internal noise that can really make leadership feel heavier than it needs to be. Alignment can also reduce friction across your team. And this is something that I think that leaders often miss. That is when they are misaligned or out of alignment, their team ends up compensating for that because they end up they have to guess what the priorities are. They have to fill in any gaps. They have to manage around the uncertainty of the person leading them. However, when you are aligned as a leader, the expectations are clear, the handoffs are a lot cleaner. And so that emotional reactivity really decreases. So a lot of team friction isn't really interpersonal. It really comes from that that misalignment from your leadership that is rolling downhill. Leading from a place of alignment creates consistency. And I don't mean rigidity, because there's a difference, right? I'm not talking about being rigid. I'm talking about being predictable. That predictability allows your teams to anticipate how you might respond. Standards don't shift unexpectedly, and feedback doesn't feel random. Your team will feel safer because your leadership is more predictable, because it is steady, it is grounded. And that steadiness doesn't come from you setting rules, it comes from your own internal alignment. Another impact of leading from a place of alignment is it inspires psychological safety. Right? You can't create psychological safety by writing a new policy about it. It's really created from your own behavior as a leader. That comes from listening without becoming defensive, holding the discomfort of challenging conversations without shutting down in the process, and staying present even when conversations get a little hard. When you do that, your team will feel safer because they're regulated. And that safety grows when your leadership is aligned internally. The last impact that I want to highlight around aligned leadership is that it really helps to reduce team burnout, right? Because you are steady, because you are grounded, you are not modeling that constant urgency, constant firefighting. You are addressing role creep instead of just simply taking on more. You set a realistic pace instead of glorifying exhaustion or glorifying doing too much for your team. And as a result, your team experiences less pressure, more clarity, and more permission to rest. As a result, burnout decreases, right? Because you're not operating from survival mode. So your team models that or mirrors that, and they aren't either. I have seen this shift over and over again. Teams start to step up when you, as the leader, stop trying to fill in every single gap. When you get clear internally, the confusion on your team goes away. And those external results always follow that internal shift. And alignment is learnable. Alignment is your greatest advantage as a leader. It allows you to lead clearer. You're able to adapt to shifts and changes without chaos. You can influence people and not have to force them. And not only that, but you create trust without trying to control everything. The strongest leaders are not the busiest ones. They are the ones who are the most internally aligned. And alignment doesn't happen by accident, especially in environments where chaos is normalized. This is the heart of the work I do through keynotes, workshops, and facilitated leadership conversations, basically helping leaders move from survival to clarity, from role creep to alignment, and from chaos to sustainable leadership. Now, if you're ready to explore what aligned leadership could look like for you or for your organization, you can learn more or submit a speaking or facilitation inquiry using the link that's inside of the show notes. Leadership does not have to feel chaotic in order to be effective. When that inner alignment changes, everything else will follow. Until next time, lead well so you can live well.